Today I want to explain to you why we protest. Ever since my undergraduate degree at Oregon State University, go Beavs, I consider myself a student of history. It intrigues me more than any other scholarly subject. As a matter of fact, I think we're living in historic times. If you think about it, every decade of the last century has seemed to be historic. We went from World War I, the Great Depression, World War II, the Civil Rights era, the fight against Vietnam, the Cold War and its ending, to 9/11. Even in the past decade, we saw our nation elect its first black president, marriage equality become law of the land, and an end to marijuana prohibition in many states. And then we're met with the 2016 election. But why would we stop making history now? These are still historic times. The question becomes, how do you want the history books to remember you? Are you brave enough to storm Normandy? Now, what I can tell you is that the history books will not read that Joe Smith couldn't get on the freeway as quick as possible on November 10th, 2016, or that Jane Doe's flight was delayed 20 minutes on a February afternoon. Instead, what they will say is when America almost regressed into fascism, the people stood up. For some reason, we don't hear about those in 1773 who just wanted to sip their morning tea. However, we do hear about those who took a stand and threw precious property into the harbor. Are you bold enough to dump tea into the Boston Harbor? Now, I'd be lying if I didn't recognize the dark past that America has, and in many ways, the dark orange present. However, thank you. However, what America does allow for is progress. For those whose marriage was illegal 5 years ago until marriage equality, we have progressed. For those such as my parents whose marriage was illegal 70 years ago until the civil rights movement, we have progressed. But progress isn't easy. Change is inconvenient to those who are comfortable. However, for those who require progress to survive, change is a necessity. Sit-ins were inconvenient to some and a necessity to others. Who do you want to be? In 1961, 22% of Americans approved of the Freedom Riders. 16% thought sit-ins at lunch counters were beneficial to civil rights. Yet we don't hear about those who just wanted to have their meals without the interference of Negroes disturbing the peace. Are you brave enough to sit at a lunch counter in the Jim Crow South? Now, we do hear about the Bull Connors or the George Wallaces of the civil rights era. Those characters made it into the history books. You know, I bet they thought they were doing the right thing. They thought they were patriots. They wanted to restore law and order in their streets. They wanted to make America great again. In 1963, 27% of Americans thought protests were helpful to civil rights. Yet, for some reason, every year we celebrate Martin Luther King Day. Dr. King was famously arrested for protesting without a permit, constantly blocked roads. However, now people like to dangle MLK over the heads of the new wave of protesters as an example of how it should be done. Yet in 1966, only 36% of Americans thought he was helpful to civil rights. Who do you want to be? At what point do we say that those facing oppression are probably the ones we should follow in fighting that oppression? The basic notion that you don't know what it's like to be me. In 1964, when Americans were asked, and I quote, if you were in the same position as Negroes, do you think it would be justified or not to march and protest in demonstrations? 54% said not justified, 46% said justified. Over half the country thought if it was them facing oppression, they would not be protesting. Now, hindsight is 20/20. Now we have the benefit of history to look back and say, the half of the country who said that were wrong. Right? They were lacking empathy. However, the smaller portion of the country who instantly and naturally trusted black people in their fight for equality did not need the benefit of history because they had the benefit of empathy. And in historic times, empathy guides the actions of the protagonists. What America needs today in these historic times is a healthy dose of empathy. More people are mad about the death of Harambe than about Quantas Hayes, who was killed by the Portland police. In Portland, riot cops were sent to a vigil for a kid who was killed by those same cops. More people are upset about who goes to the bathroom next to them than fighting against the oppression of those people. We live in a country where even saying the words Black Lives Matter is controversial. Black Lives Matter? That's too radical. Is it too radical to believe I matter too? Is that really so fringe? Nonetheless, understanding works both ways. We've gotten to a place in America where people think if they disagree with you, they have to hate you, or that I understand what's in your heart since it's different than what is in my own. However, we who have decided to be on the right side of history acknowledge that we cannot begin to understand another person's experience. The basic notion that I don't know what it's like to be you. We can't leave this value behind when dealing with those with opposing views. We're not going to convince a white supremacist they're wrong by yelling racist. On the other hand, we can't combat racism by excusing it as conservatism or patriotism. What we must do is talk to each other, plead to one another, ask them what side of history they want to be on. Because just because someone voted differently than you does not mean they voted against the Constitution. It was once said the founders were so great they created a system so brilliant even idiots could run it. And we shall see. But the point is, we are supposed to differ on policy. That is natural. What we cannot differ on is humanity. That should be fringe. You don't expect empathy, you bring it to their front door. In 1964, when Americans were asked if they think the protests should stop, 74% said yes. They said, we get it, we heard you, we're working on it, but your protests have become an inconvenience. Now, I understand being stuck in traffic is inconvenient, but you know what else is inconvenient? Being black in America, being houseless when it's below freezing outside, being gay in America, being an immigrant in today's political atmosphere. They say do it in a way that won't impact other people. Well, what about what the system does? Which impact is greater, traffic or deportations? Starbucks windows or oppression? Flight delays or racism? Howard Zinn said, protest beyond the sanction of the law is not a departure from democracy, but it's absolutely essential to it. It's not American to oppose freedom of expression. That is un-American. Fascism is un-American. And the notion that dissent is inherently violent is at the core of fascism. Just as you don't need to be a self-avowed racist to advance the grip of white supremacy in America, you don't need to be a self-avowed fascist to advance the rise of fascism in America. It's not enough to simply recognize your privilege. You need to use it as a platform to lift others up, because obviously some of America can't hear it yet. Are you brave enough to join the Freedom Riders on their bus trip to the Jim Crow South? People say, I support your movement, I just don't support the tactics. Well, you don't support the movement. You aren't being empathetic, and this is a movement of empathy. Don't criticize how people fight their own oppression, but when you do finally recognize that oppression, fight alongside them. We will always accept you with open and sometimes broken arms. We should be expanding our right to protest, not restricting them. On January 20th, the day Donald Trump was inaugurated, I was at a peaceful protest that was gassed, pepper sprayed, subjected to all types of violence. The next day, Women's March, an incredibly powerful and also peaceful event that occurred with no violence at the hands of the police. And the excuse for the discrepancy, well, first one didn't have a permit. Well, you don't get a permit for a lunch counter sit-in, and you don't get a permit to dump tea into the Boston Harbor. What if I took the position that some people take for the First Amendment for the Second? What if I said that because there was a murder last night, I'm going to gas, pepper spray, and subject to violence all the people that peacefully exercise their Second Amendment rights because, well, someone messed up last night? People would be up in arms, literally. Yet for some reason, those same people are quite willing to say that since one person is accused of a crime at a protest, that we should take away the whole city's First Amendment rights to catch one person for the heinous crime of disorderly conduct in the second degree. What if I said that about guns? You know, the First Amendment is first for a reason. A lot more people have voices than guns. So how does the Second Amendment apply to AK-47s and the First Amendment doesn't even apply to standing in the street at a protest? As much as this is a war of ideas, it's also a war against complacency. Today, only 29% of voters think protesting the current president is helpful. Sound familiar? Resist how you can, just do not be silent. Because when your grandkids ask you what you were doing during these historic times, you want to be able to look at their history books and point to the good guys and say, I was standing with them. I was standing with them. It's not that rewarding. George Soros isn't paying me that much, but being on the right side of history is priceless. That said, take care of each other, keep each other safe. Get out of your social media bubble. Talk to a stranger. Talk to the people who seem scary to you. These are going to be historic times whether we succeed or not. We need to get money out of politics now. We need to deal with climate change now. The rise of fascism does not have to be the last chapter of this unit. We can be a beacon of light. Let's be that page in the history books. Thank you.